Hey, good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to call to order and welcome you to our Middlesex County Council meeting for Tuesday, June 20th. We acknowledge that the land we stand upon today is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples, who have long-standing relationships with the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames First Nation, and Munsee Delaware Nation. We acknowledge that the treaties that are specific to this area are Treaty 2, the McKee Purchase, Treaty 3, Between the Lakes Purchase, Treaty 6, London Township Purchase, Treaty 1, Longwoods Purchase, and Treaty 29, the Huron Tract Purchase. We value the significant contributions, both in the past and the present, of local and regional First Nations of Turtle Island. We acknowledge historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we affirm our commitment to honoring Indigenous voices, nations, and cultures, and to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. So, as everyone can see today is the day that I must pay up when it comes to the wager that was challenged to me by the warden of Peterborough County, Bonnie Clark. As you might recall, Warden Clark challenged me during the OHL Championship Series that saw the London Knights defeated by the Peterborough Petes. The Petes won the series in 6 games, and they were 6 well-fought games. I was fortunate to see one of the games in London, and my goodness, the battle from both teams. I don't think either team left anything on the ice in that series. It was an exciting series to watch. As warden, I am afforded many opportunities, and this one certainly is a highlight. I would encourage any future warden to engage in this sort of friendly competition, not only with colleagues in our area, but those beyond the traditional neighborly borders. In doing so, you expand the reach of Middlesex County. I now have had the pleasure of making a connection with Warden Clark, and the staffs from both offices have met up, and that's where the jersey came from, and they've now gotten together and they have a relationship as well. I have been able to learn more about Peterborough County than I knew before. Our basket of defeat was shared with a resident of Peterborough County through a social media campaign that the municipal office ran. And now they are more aware of the local treats that Middlesex County has to offer. As you all know, I just love about everything there is about hockey. And I especially love how it brings communities together. I saw this every season that my kids played hockey, whether it was in tournaments or Silver Stick or OMHA championships. And I saw that in this series as well. As Warden Clark pointed out, I think that people of all ages from Middlesex County and Peterborough County can aspire to emulate the good sportsmanship and professionalism demonstrated by the players from both teams. Moreover, we should be all proud of their strong efforts made in the course of the championship series. As municipal leaders, we can certainly bring that to each and every table that we sit at. So I'm humbly wearing Warden Clark's own jersey today, in defeat, but with respect, not only for the Petes and the London Knights, but for the spirit of sportsmanship and community that this wager was made. So to make it official, I'm showing this to Warden Clark. I'm wearing it. I'll wear it for the whole meeting. And this is her jersey. And congratulations to the Peterborough Petes once again. Okay, so with that out of the way.
Warden, I have a question in that whole spirit. Isn't the only reason they won because we gave them a goalie from this region?
So their goalie is actually from London. And I believe that he actually won the MVP of the turn of that series, perhaps. But yes, he was definitely the stronghold on that team.
So I just wanted to say that in the interest of sportsmanship, that he did a great job and we're glad to lend them to them so they could have this victory.
Good point. Thank you very much for that. Okay, is there any provision, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, then I do need a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Grantham and Councillor McMillan. All in favor? And that is carried. We have in front of us two sets of minutes, both from May 23rd, the open minutes from the meeting of County Council and of course, the closed session minutes. I trust that you've been able to review both of them. If nothing has to be amended, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the approved motion in front of you. Councillor McGuire and Councillor DeVete. All in favor? And that's carried. On to action items. Cindy got a report in front of us for the 2023 borrowing bylaw.
Thanks, and through the warden. Each year, council is required to pass a bylaw for the line of credit the county has with the Bank of Nova Scotia. The county only has to pay if we actually use the line of credit. The authorized amount is $2 million. This report also outlines the credit card limits currently in place. The county is authorized for an amount of $300,000, and we are within that limit. And the finance department manages the credit card process. At this time, I'm asking council to approve the borrowing bylaw for 2023, and very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions from council? Nothing? Okay, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion in front of you. Councillor Smybert and Councillor Grantham. All in favor? And that's carried. Also, sticking with Cindy, although maybe Joe's delivering this one. This is with regards to an annual program that we have, the Middlesex supports for 2023 to 2024.
Thank you. And through the warden, I have no further comments beyond what is in the report, but I am available for any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thanks for that, Joe. Are there questions on the report in front of you? Councillor Ropp.
Thank you. Through the warden, I'm just wondering, how do these amounts, how do they get figured out?
It's a good question. So thank you. And through the warden. So these amounts are requested each year by each of the organizations. So they have been set for multiple years in the past. So back in 2009, sorry, when this program first started when the NCBS was retracted back through Cindy and through the work of the Social Services Department, these amounts were set at that time. So throughout those years, though, they have not increased or decreased at this time.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow up to that, Joe, does the number of number of children that are at these, is that some of the basis though? The amount of residents?
So I may ask Cindy to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Through the warden to the councillor, can you just clarify what you're asking for?
Okay, so I guess I'm just wondering, like with the amounts, does the number of children that are in the program, does that have an effect of the amounts that's given?
Okay, through the warden to the councillor, most definitely when the program was set up, we looked at the number of individuals, whether they're children or youth, how many were going to be served, what the program outcome was going to be. And each year we do look at it to make sure that the outcomes are being reached in order to make sure that we come back to council each year recommending these.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor DeVete.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to Cindy or Joe, I'm not sure who can answer this. It was really good to read that Western was able to continue their programming through electronic means and that they didn't need the money and returned it. I'm just wondering, do you know already whether they're going to continue in that format, or do they need support going forward, or what's the outlook for that program?
Yes, thank you. And through the warden. So this year they have requested the $5,000 because they are moving back to an in-person program. So we are going to support that through Western. So.
Thank you.
Right, any other comments? Okay, with that, you have a fairly lengthy motion in front of you that I won't read, but is certainly on the agenda for review. I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that one. Councillor Roth and Councillor Brennan. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to 5.A.3. This is a report actually from me. It is a new report. We've never done this before, but as we have evolved our communications department, we thought it would be a great idea to share with council and essentially our residents the schedule of the warden and what the warden does on a day-to-day basis. And so you'll see the events that I've been involved in up until the end of May. And certainly it's just for information, but if you have any questions or any clarification, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on that. Okay, seeing none, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive that report for information. Councillor McMillan and Councillor McGuire. And I guess I should note that this will be a report that you'll probably get 3 of them a year. So you continue to be updated. The next one is also from me. And this has to do with a discussion that's been going on for a number of years with regards to our representation on the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. Right now, the way we are represented, it is with the warden who, changes on a yearly basis. And it was actually Warden Smith during his time that he started to broach the discussion with the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and have some backroom discussions here with maybe looking at the appointment to the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, much like we make appointments to other committees and that sort of thing. For the most part, the wardens that sit on WOWC are there for 2 years. I think that there's 2 other wardens that change on a yearly basis for us, for WOWC. But what we have found, and I think if you speak to past wardens, it's very difficult to get any traction with the organization. They meet 4 times a year. Of course, there's staff representation right now. Chris sits and on the staff side of things, and not that it's important, but it is a piece to note that because we are only a warden for a year and we change every year, Middlesex would never really have an opportunity to be chair of that organization. So, there certainly has been, there is certainly value in that. Obviously, it's a larger commitment, but it is something to note. So the discussion that I bring to the table is that we treat it as an appointment, and that the warden essentially in year 1 could appoint, that could be the sitting person for, and WOWC is still, they still have a discussion amongst themselves whether they're more comfortable with a 2-year appointment or a 4-year appointment, but whether it's the warden or a person from the county or from council, excuse me, that would represent the warden on WOWC. Certainly the sitting warden can always come to the meetings at his or her convenience, but appointing somebody for a period of at least 2 years does offer stability and continuity to the work that's being done at WOWC. Chris can probably speak to that a little bit if you're looking for some more background, since he's been representing staff for a few years now. But it's the same sort of thing. You're kind of brought up to speed on everything by meeting 3, and meeting 4 is your last meeting. So that's a discussion that I'm bringing to council for comment and consideration. So happy to answer any questions or provide any clarification. Councillor DeVete.
Thank you, Warden. And through you to council, I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I strongly support this motion. Having a voice at that level that is educated and informed over time, I think is worthy. The advocacy work and the projects that are tackled at that level are applicable to all kinds of all levels. And there's a benefit in having that done. So in Eastern Ontario, for example, a lot of the work that was started with broadband came out of that kind of percolating up thing and the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. So I think it's a really good thing. And the other part too is that, of course, should you become the warden of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, you also go to AMO. And I chair the caucus at AMO, and the Eastern and Western Ontario Wardens Caucus representatives are automatically appointed, and they bring really good commentary to the table because they know what's happening in terms of all the projects. Whether you're working on seniors' homes or affordable housing, it's good advocacy. So I think this is a really good idea. And we've had conversations too about somebody gets started and then there's just nothing happening. So to someone who's interested, I would strongly encourage you to, I think we should all have the conversation. And if we go that way, to anyone who's interested in that kind of work, I think that's something that you should put your name forward to. So that's it for me.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments or need for clarification on anything? Councillor Roth.
Thank you, Warden. And I think this question is to you. The choice of whether it would be a 2-year or 4-year commitment, would that be the choice of the Warden's Caucus that would have that decision to make, or here at the county?
Well, I don't think that they really are fussy one way or another. It would be, it could be direction from this council, or we could work, staff could work best with the staff at WOC to see what best suits their needs as well. I personally, and it probably might have been a little bit clear, it should have been a little bit clearer. I think a 2-year appointment would be appropriate. I know that a 4-year, it is significant, but I would leave that either up for discussion or for the staffs to work out.
Thank you. That would seem right to me as well, a 2-year appointment, because most of the wardens, as you say, that's on it now are 2-year appointments. So
Yeah, there's just a handful that are there for the full 4 years. Any other questions or clarifications? So the motion in front of you is written out, and I guess maybe I would add then wording to include a 2-year appointment. Can we do that, clerk? Somewhere along the way, that the recommendation. So wording will be added in to include a 2-year appointment. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor DeVitt and Councillor Smybert. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much for that support. Okay, Chris and Cindy, the two of you, to talk about insurance, everybody's favorite topic. And I will turn it to you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Warden. The reports in front of council today, our insurance renewal is up at the end of this month. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things in the report and then answer any questions. You can see the proposed insurance renewal is to an amount of $1,240,957, which is an increase of about 10% over what we paid for our last renewal. I would note that industry-wide municipal insurance rates are going up at an average of 17%. So this increase, although it is not insignificant, is less than what's being seen in other areas around the province. I would just say that there's a couple of things that aren't included in this insurance coverage. One of them is the exclusion for long-term care facilities, and this is just something that hasn't been covered off by insurers in the past, and cyber insurance. And there's a number of challenges with cyber insurance that I won't get into here, other than to say that Chris Bailey and the IT team at the county are going to make a application to Intact and report back when we see what's contained within that potential cyber insurance. I would note we're still fortunate to have one of the lower levels of deductibles in the county of Middlesex at $25,000. Again, most county insurance deductibles are between $75,000 and $100,000. And from what I understand from what's been explained to me from Intact is that this doesn't really have a huge effect on our premiums. It's really just more of a reflection of how well we're doing with regards to making claims or defending claims against the county. for the types of activities that would require us to pay this deductible. I also want to note that the amount of coverage that we're being insured for against our assets, which is our buildings, building contents and unlicensed equipment is up about 10% as well. So we're at over $99 million with those types of assets compared to just over $90 million. That was included in our coverage during the last renewal period of June of 2022 to the present. So I'll leave it there. And Cindy and I have reviewed it. The insurance document is there as well if there's any specific questions about that. But we're recommending that the renewal at the rate quoted by Intact be accepted.
Okay, comments or questions, clarification on this report? Councillor Rock.
Sorry, thank you once again, Warden, through you. It's just a question. Are we going to hear more then about the cyber insurance part of it? We're going to have another report on that? Because I do have some questions on that, but not on this part.
Yeah, through the warden to Councillor Rob. Yes, we're going to come back with a separate report. We just the process of getting the cyber insurance coverage is taking a lot longer. It's a very complex type of insurance, and we'll be back with a future report to council probably later this summer once we have the details hammered out with Intact.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, then you do have a recommended motion in front of you to approve the proposal that was submitted by Intact for 12 months. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Smybert and Councillor McGuire. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, any inquiries? Any notices of motion? Any councillor comments or other business? Okay, seeing none, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to move us into the committee of the whole at 1:22 p.m. Councillor Grantham and a seconder, Councillor McGuire. All in favor? And that's carried. So we do have a delegation today, and they're just making their way to the speaker's desk. But I am happy to welcome members of the Middlesex London Ontario Health Team. Amber Alpaw Bishop, who is the lead with the MLOHT. And I've had the pleasure of working with Amber in the past as I sat on the OLT. And Melissa Linsman, the primary care transformation lead with the primary team. And or are you Jane? Oh, of course. And so Jane Tillman, who's the advisor with the workforce. So welcome, ladies. It's great to have you here in person. I'm always pleased to welcome delegations in person now. Don't take it for granted anymore. And I will turn the speakers over to you.
Great. Thanks very much for having us today. And I won't take time to do introductions because you did a great job with that one, Warden. So I'm going to turn it over to Jane just to step us through. So we're not going to go through the briefing note that was presented in advance, but we will certainly touch on some highlights from that briefing note and welcome any questions and discussion.
Great. So we can go to the next slide, please. So we're here today to talk about our proposal to fund a physician recruitment program for Middlesex London. And we thought it was important for you to understand the primary care environment in Middlesex County in particular. So if we look, we can see that there are 50 family physicians that provide comprehensive care to the residents of Middlesex County or that have practices in Middlesex County. And within those physicians, on average, they have about 1,321 patients rostered to them, which, as you can see, is a larger number than the average number of patients a physician in London would have. The other point to note is that the physicians in Middlesex County tend to be older. So fully 27% of patients rostered to a physician in Middlesex County are rostered to a physician over the age of 60. So that really is a retirement risk. So the big box on the right is before we go ahead, is the number of unattached patients. And I'm sure you've all heard from constituents about the need to have a family physician. Residents of Middlesex, London really don't have any options to find family physicians. New family physicians are few and far between. And as such, we have a large number of residents, over 65,000, that do not have a primary care provider. So this is an issue. If we go to the next slide, the map on the right shows you the distribution of family physicians in Middlesex County. And I wanted to point out a few issues that are specific to Middlesex County. As I just mentioned, the age of physicians, it is a retirement risk. And the fact that these older physicians tend to have more patients, when they do retire, newer physicians coming on board do not want such large rosters, so it may be difficult to replace them one-to-one. It's always more difficult to recruit new physicians to rural locations for many factors, but that's just the fact. And the other point is too, infrastructure is so important. So if you've got growing communities, but there's no physical space to put new physicians, that's a barrier to new physicians coming. And we know, I work with family medicine residents and talk to them about their transition to new practices. What are they looking for? They want to work with other colleagues, so they don't want to have solo offices anymore. You have physicians in some parts of the county that are solo family physicians. They want to be with colleagues. They want to be supported by team-based care, so family health teams, for example. And they want to have newer buildings that are accessible and have high-speed internet. So all very important considerations. So when you think about the need for primary care in Middlesex County, what you currently have, how are you going to get there? How are you going to bring new practitioners to Middlesex County? Well, up until now, London Middlesex has had no mechanism to do that. Nobody has been responsible or proactive about recruiting physicians to our area. And this is an issue. So if we go to the next slide, what we wanted to do, our small working group, was to advocate for a physician recruitment program. So we looked around the area, and we're in a catchment area health-wise called Ontario Health West. So I looked at all the areas, the Ontario Health teams, and classified whether they had a recruitment program or not. And you can see that Middlesex London is in the minority, with Windsor, Essex, and Burlington on the other end, having no proactive physician recruitment program. All of the other OHTs have some form of physician recruitment program. And in today's environment, where it's very competitive for new physicians can pick and choose where they want to go. So OHTs, communities, municipalities, even urban cities need to have a way to attract physicians to their communities. And if you go to the next slide, you can see we did an assessment, an environmental scan of physician recruitment programs in the areas. And we looked at, how do they operate? We posted their website, what their annual budget was, who were the funders. And in virtually all of the physician recruitment programs, either a city or a municipality is either the sole funder or a major funder of a physician recruitment program. And often the rationale is because of the support for economic development. And if you want to grow your population, ensuring that you have access to primary care is critical. So after an assessment of the programs, we determined that the program we wanted to model was based on the Hamilton Physicians Program. It's a program that's funded, as you can see, by multiple partners, and it allows you to spread the cost of a recruitment program amongst those funders. At one point, I was working with some stakeholders in Middlesex County, and they were thinking of starting their own recruitment program. Doing it this way, it gives you sort of more bang for your dollars, lower economic commitment from each of the partners, but I think a larger presence in recruitment for everyone. So this is what we are going with, and Amber's going to talk a little bit about what we're specifically asking for.
Thanks, Jane. So we can advance 2 slides. Thanks. So this is just an overview. So Jane spoke to the why we think we need a program like this. And this is just a slide to reinforce why specifically the Middlesex London OHT is getting involved and taking a leadership role in this work. So many years ago, when the OHT was first getting its feet underneath itself, we were required to identify 3 key performance indicators for this OHT or Ontario Health Team. And improving access to primary care was identified as one of those key performance indicators. So with that, we think it only appropriate that the OHT would take a leadership role in working with partners to really step up this kind of program. We also think that it would be appropriate for us to manage any of the administrative oversight of the program itself and the person that we hire to be the coordinator of the work. So processing payroll, et cetera. We go to the next slide. I'm turning it back to Jane just to talk about the detail of the role of that recruitment coordinator role.
So what we're proposing for the main use of the funds that we are asking for is to support hiring of a full-time physician recruiter. And I've just put, it's hard to read there, but you probably have it in front of you. What would be the role? What does a recruiter do? Well, there's 4 key areas that they're involved in: strategy development, stakeholder engagement. I can barely read them, provider. Maybe you can put it there. Just thank you. Provider recruitment and retention. And so we really also want to emphasize the retention piece because it's so essential once you've recruited a physician to ensure that they stay and they're engaged in their community and feel supported. So all of these roles would be part of it. And definitely as we move forward with the program, we would have a specific job description that meets the needs of all the funding stakeholders. And we can go to the next slide. So this table, again, this is going to be another tricky one to read, but I'm not sure all the detail is super important. But I think this table just demonstrates, again, the approach that we wanted to take with the Middlesex London OHT is really an Ontario Health Team approach, where we do this in partnership with many stakeholders. So the advantage of that, as Jane outlined, is that we get to share the costs of the program and the recruiter role itself, but we also get contributions from all different partners around how we should operate a program like this and how we best serve this community. So you can see in that table that there is a breakdown of financial contribution. So the overall budget, very similar to the Hamilton program, is $200,000. And then we've assigned a proposed split of those costs across the partners and base that also on the experience in Hamilton. The other column of information there to the right is around in-kind contributions. And of course, that's an important piece as well. So just want to be transparent. The OHT itself with its operational dollars is not going to contribute to the funding of the program itself. But again, we will manage a lot of the administrative work of the role in the program. So we're happy to take on that in-kind role. And we have other partners who will be doing a mix of both or one or the other. And that's all meant to be transparent there in the table. And we've asked many partners, so all of the partners have been presented with this opportunity, and we have slowly been having responses coming back, and to date, responses have been positive, which is great. So we can probably go to the next slide. And this just summarizes the next step. So with all the partners, we've asked for a response and confirmation by June 30th in anticipation of getting the program started by October 1st. And that is the opportunity for this council now to decide. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane and Amber. That was a great explanation of your proposal. Any questions or comments or looking for clarification from council? Councillor DeVete?
I've got a number, but I'll just start with one. Given the number of schools in Ontario, they're graduating different numbers of MDs of various areas of practice and interest. I was wondering what proportion of the students coming out of school are choosing family practice as opposed to other, and how does that match up with the need?
Well, it's a good question because it is a big issue. The percentage of medical students matching to family medicine across Canada has been declining over the past few years. It's this past year, about 30% of students have matched to family medicine, and then the rest amongst the other specialties. It was as high as 35% 4 years ago. So while it doesn't seem like a lot, it is declining. And there are many efforts by organizations that work with physicians, including universities and colleges, Ministry of Health, and also physician organizations to bolster interest in family medicine.
Have anything more?
I guess part B then is, given those numbers and the need that we have, what are the odds that we land one?
They're much greater if you have a physician recruitment program, because you can work with physicians and those that do, and we have, as I said, programs throughout our area, will work with physicians, ensure that ones that grew up in your area know that they can come back and have opportunities. So it's a long-term program as well. I work for Health Force Ontario, and we also support external physician recruitment. So a lot of communities rely on bringing physicians that have been trained outside of Canada. So there's different opportunities, but by having a recruitment program, you can tap into all the opportunities.
Yeah, I may just explicitly add that I think that is a really great opportunity. So I think when we have a structured program like this, we can be more proactive about it. So even, first year students going into it, we're so fortunate that we have a school here locally. Why not get them connected with local physicians, local family practitioners who are practicing here and can tell them the benefits of living and practicing here and get them excited again about primary care.
Councillor Grantham.
Thanks, Warden, through you. I wonder if you could walk me through the different acronyms that are on slide 10. Some of them I was able to decipher, but there's a few at the bottom. I'm curious what those organizations are.
That is an excellent point. And I made a joke earlier that every sector has their acronyms because I was trying to figure out what some of yours were earlier as well. So the London Economic Development Corporation, I'm going to skip to that one because we've talked about Middlesex London OHT as us here today. London Health Sciences Center, St. Joseph's Healthcare Center, Middlesex Hospital Alliance is MHA, Middlesex London Health Unit,
London District Academy of Medicine.
thank you, and London Middlesex Primary Care Alliance.
Councillor McMillan.
Through the warden, you answered most of the question in terms of foreign trained doctors and health professionals. Has the OMA relaxed some of the rules to allow them to either partner or shadow a doctor or something along this line to expand that opportunity for municipalities?
Yes, there have been some changes, and it's through the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, and they're the ones that set the rules for licensing. So they've reduced the rules for supervision for physicians that have trained in the US, for example. So that's making it easier for a lot of Canadians may do their residency in the US. Now they can come back. There is going to be a new program launched this fall that will allow physicians that have changed in trained and or practiced in unapproved countries to come to Ontario and not have to do a residency, which has been the program in the past. So we might see physicians coming to Ontario to rural locations more quickly. And some of your locations in Middlesex County will qualify.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Smybert.
Sorry, I want to thank you for your presentation. And I think some of this material really resonates amongst most of us. I know that in our section of the county, it's true that we have doctors who have been in our communities for years. And that's my fear, is that we will eventually lose them. So I definitely see the importance of this kind of a program. And I have seen other municipalities that have really succeeded with this program. I guess my question is more about timing, because our budget cycle runs from January to December. So obviously we've already approved our budget. Any consideration, because some of the municipalities like the City of London, for example, too, they likely would have already approved their budget. Would there be a consideration of changing the timeline of this program so that we could carefully consider it during our budget deliberations so we could make a decision at that time? I just feel like our hands are a little bit tied right now, seeing that we've passed the budget unless staff can recommend a funding source.
So I would say that we certainly need Middlesex County to be a partner in this work. So we wouldn't have a funding barrier be a barrier to that involvement in the work. I can't speak to whether there, if there's a way through which the funding can be approved or not, but just know that we would consider you a partner, even if that timing of finance isn't working out. And the way we framed it in the briefing note and the way we've been talking about it in the planning is a 3-year commitment. So, we don't want a lot of partners to step up for 1 year and then, kind of similar to the earlier conversation, you're just getting going and then you want to, keep the momentum going. So we're hoping for that 3-year commitment. So I suppose, if we had to wait for the timing of the funding cycles from Middlesex County to come on later, then that could be a consideration.
Councillor DeVete.
Thank you, Warden. Just to springboard from Councillor Smiber's question. Yeah, I noticed the date is the end of the month. That's 10 days from now. That doesn't even give us a really big chance to have a conversation. So I appreciate your comments about cutting some slack. So there's some conversation opportunity to have some meaningful dialogue about this. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that deadline was set. We wanted to have enough partners on board to know that we could get going on a posting, get it posted, and know that we could get started. But, in full transparency, we have had some other partners say, I'm not sure if I can meet your deadline. And we've said, that's okay. Let's work together and figure out when the timing works.
Anything further from council? I did have one question and I just want to make sure. So the commitment for this budget for the 200,000, that's for the position only. So it doesn't take into consideration any sort of incentivizing program that might be established for doctors coming to communities.
Yeah, so it covers the salary of the role, that coordinator role, and travel and going to events, printing of materials, all of that rolled into one budget. And we, as a working group, decided not to start in the space of incentivizing. We thought we would get started with some other tactics and therefore didn't budget for that at that time. And Hamilton also does not budget for that.
Okay, that was my next question. In the communities that you've looked at the program, just wondering about incentivizing programs and where you see that.
Yes, there are many municipalities that offer financial incentives for physicians to commit with a return of service. So for example, Elgin County being the closest, they have I'll say a $30,000 incentive for physicians to help them with the startup costs for their offices. Chatham-Kent offers a relocation reimbursement. So, and I mean, it ranges. Not every community likes to talk about what they offer because they want to remain competitive, but definitely there's a spectrum of supports.
Okay, thank you for that. Before any other further questions or clarification? Then I might just look to Cindy and put her on the spot here. Staff has developed a recommendation, but I'm wondering if maybe it might be prudent to reword that and accept the report for information. And then maybe Cindy could work on bringing a report back to the funding, how that might look, and whether we can make a decision for a change in budget or whether we put that off to our budget discussion. But if maybe I might look to Cindy to bring further information back to council.
Through the warden, definitely I'll come back to council with some recommendations and next steps.
Perfect. That would be great. So at this time, I think what I'll do is ask for the motion that's on the floor to be that the Middlesex London Ontario Health Team Primary Care Recruitment Presentation be received for information at this point. And if I could get a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor McMillan and Councillor DeVete. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so thank you very much for that discussion. And from a staff to staff perspective, we'll keep you posted as to the discussions that happen around here. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to reports from county officers. Oh, and one from our CAO, Industrial Assessment, a review of Middlesex County industrial tax base and improvement methodologies. Bill.
We have a presentation. Did I do this, Paul? Okay, let me start by saying that a couple things. What does the next slide say? Oh yeah, I'm going to do this. All right. Okay, so the executive summary is that at the local council day we had, which was fantastic, we got some great questions. I gave a story there about just how offside we are from an assessment perspective and what that means and what it means to our community. And it led to this report. So I actually talked to some of the counselors that raised this question about our assessment profile and said, hey, we're doing something, we're trying to do something about the question that you asked. You know, whenever people ask me why I got into municipal government, I tell them a lot of different things. There's like 3 or 4 different reasons why I got into municipal government. But the honest to God truth is I got into municipal government because of a game called Sim City. I don't know how many of you know about Sim City. Great game. There's several versions. I encourage you to play it if you want. But whenever I was in grade 8, this game came out and you would design a city and see whether it succeeded or failed. The natural tendency for everybody that plays Sim City is to put big plants everywhere, industrial plants everywhere in your city, because that is the most revenue and it requires the least amount of services. Of course, your city fails when you do that. It doesn't take long for you to learn that that's not the right balance, that's not the right mix, and you can't have that idealistic city. But that is the idealistic community from a municipal finance perspective. Now, you might say, why is that idealistic? Well, I already mentioned, you don't have to provide a lot of soft services to industry. As well, for those of you that understand how tax ratios work, that is a massive tax ratio. And, you know, we talk about tax rates, that's one thing. But when you look at tax ratios, the lowest tax ratios are for agriculture. That's 0.25. Then you look at the next lowest, that would be residential. That's 1. Industrial and commercial tax ratios are in the 2s. So if it's $1 of tax assessment is not $1 of tax assessment. There's quite a massive difference between those types of assessments and industrial assessment. And so whenever we think about the ideal community profile from a municipal assessment perspective, we have the opposite. We have the inverse of my dream Sim City, because we have almost, you know, it feels like some days 1,000% residential, a little bit of commercial, and very limited industrial. And so what I'll say about this is that we have to change that profile. And the other thing I would say is, how did we get in this mess? Well, we got in this mess around residential development because we're sleeping next to an elephant, that is London. And we were, for the most part, bedroom communities, a group of bedroom communities for a number of years. But there was something that actually accelerated that. And that was the annexation that happened in the mid-90s, because we got the water and sewer infrastructure fund money out of that. And that was really designed to replace residential assessment. And we talked about this fund at the last meeting. That was really designed to replace residential assessment that was lost whenever we lost those lands. And at the time, that was really important because I was here sitting at the table designing what that should look like. And when I talked about industrial assessment loss, that was kind of important to council, but not really, because at the time, if you go way back in time, they were worried about losing communities. They were worried about losing schools in Glencoe. They were worried about losing shops in Park Hill. They were worried about having enough people to sustain communities. And industry was moving into neighboring areas, but those people were really important. And so we focused on residential water and sewer infrastructure development, and we did too good of a job, in my view. Because it became, you know, with dropping development charges in the county, low cost of infrastructure, lower cost of land generally compared to more urban areas, we now have a massive small urban residential assessment. and very limited industrial assessment. So I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Paul, but there's a reason why we're here today. And I know you've heard me say this term a lot. It's educate, 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 ask. We've educated you on the funds that we received and how we got them and what we used them for. Now we want to answer that question that was asked at the local day. And really, when you look at these numbers, and I think, Paul, I'll let you walk everybody through them because you've done the math on all this. But when you look at what we've been able to achieve using 0.25 assessment and 1 assessment, when our neighbors around us have had the advantage of that multiplier of industrial, we have to fix it. And the time is now to fix it because the opportunity is there. So these education sessions are not happening by accident. Michelle asked a very good question this week. She said, Bill, what do you think needs to come out of all this? We need to invest in some way to turn this assessment train around. Because if we keep just building houses, single family houses in this, we're not going to be able to sustain the service and that we need. We need this other type of assessment there. Paul, my friend, you take it from here.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great introduction to it. So on the slide is a financial information return. Cindy and her team and all of your treasurers complete these annually, and it gives us the best opportunity to do a comparative analysis across the province to try to compare apples to apples. So we've done an analysis of all upper tier municipalities in Ontario, and now we've drilled down to just Southwestern Ontario counties. And as you can see, Middlesex has a below average industrial share of taxation. And also to take into consideration, 16.21% of Middlesex County residential property is actually farmland. So going back to Bill's point, they're only paying 25% of that one. So if you go to the next slide, to get to the Southwestern average, we'd need just about 130 million of additional industrial assessment to generate just under $1 million of additional municipal taxation. And that would bring us to the Southwestern Ontario average. And this is where it's fascinating. So there is 403 parcels of land within Middlesex County that have some form of industrial land designation on it. And we currently, if you think of it in a farming term, yield about $110,000 per acre of industrial land. That's actually quite low, and it speaks to the dispersed nature of the industrial land classifications in Middlesex County. So in looking at this, the goal is to intensify that and get the yield of industrial assessment up to $1 million, $1.5 million, maybe even $3 million in condensed areas. So the real question is, how would we go about doing that, or what options may council consider? And we landed on a few items. Next slide, please. And it starts with the county loan program. The county loan program was originally designed, Cindy provided a great overview at the last meeting, to replace lost assessment. You could modify the current program to really focus on growth capital projects that result in linear infrastructure, so water and wastewater, and that just supports assessment growth. And you could also modify the county loan program to support industrial land assembly for tracts of land to be primarily designated industrial with a minimum size of 200 acres. You could provide other staff, Kara and the team, opportunity to meet with the ministry to kind of speak about the benefits of having these industrial parcels located around major corridors with utilities, with gas, with access to rail if possible. So you're kind of doing economic development and you're building your industrial tax base. And then as add-ons, you could look at implementing a Middlesex County industrial land community improvement program. And the goal of that would be to offer incremental tax financing to incentivize industrial businesses to locate within Middlesex County in the respective lower tiers. And then on top of that, the saying, homes are where jobs go to sleep. At the same time, Dirk and the team are working on the attainable housing review. You could also consider an affordable housing community improvement plan, again, with one of the benefits being a tax incremental financing. So the reason we say tax incremental financing is because obviously budget was tense this year. You're not adding actual dollars into it. You're speaking with hypothetical dollars. So if someone wants to come, put an industrial place of business within the county. You could look at a program where in year one, they get 100% tax rebate and you knock off 20% every year for 5 years. So it's future money to incentivize the come. So those are really actions that would work to address and attempt to diversify the tax base and specifically the assessment base as well. And at the same time, you'd be working to bring in additional jobs. Moving to the next slide, there is benefits at all levels for this. Provincially, you're supporting provincial economic growth strategy. It aligns with obvious current provincial government priorities. From a local government perspective, it assists with non-residential classification assessment growth, which the same way that would benefit the county, it would also benefit the local municipality, and you diversify that assessment base. Specifically for Middlesex County, it helps address the current financial realities of Middlesex County and allows continued focus on core service areas. Will allow the county to maintain a low residential property classification tax rate. I think that's one of the most fascinating things from this research is it is truly impressive how the county has been able to provide comprehensive, effective services while maintaining that lower residential tax rate, given the impediment of lack of industrial tax base. And lastly, if you move forward with some iteration of a program, it provides an opportunity to continue that advocacy and conversations with the provincial government, and it would differentiate Middlesex County, specifically with the loan program. A lot of upper tier governments don't have that tool in the toolbox to say to the province, we're putting significant assets into this fight, come join us here. So there is options, and I think that was what we wanted to present today.
And the other thing that I didn't mention is just that the opportunity is so high right now. Paul and I and Kara have been talking just about many other areas are saturated and can't do some of these things that are out there as opportunities. And our proximity to some of the new growth that's happening on our borders, plus access to the 400 series highways, makes a couple of areas in the county perfectly ideal for something like this, where a lower tier and an upper tier partnership to accomplish this increased assessment could work extremely well, very, very quickly. And one other little piece of background, Kara and I were talking earlier today, this isn't the first time we've actually tried to have this conversation. We've tried twice previously in my time here, and I don't think there was any attempts before that. But I remember 2 conversations, and we continually bogged down in those days on, it was a much different geographic map back then, and we bogged down on sort of local politics. And I think we've kind of risen above it now. We know everywhere is growing fast. There really aren't municipal boundaries the way there used to be. Like jobs that are created in Strathroy benefit Park Hill, and jobs that are created in Park Hill benefit Strathroy. We all recognize that because people are so mobile now compared to where they were when we first started having this conversation. So I think the major differences between the last 2 times this was discussed around here and now is opportunity is incredible. I don't think this type of opportunities ever existed for us before. And you're perfectly positioned for it. And I think a lot of those sort of local parochial interests have disappeared, where we're thinking bigger about economic development now than we ever have before. So we'd be glad to answer any questions you have, but I'm hopeful that the next step really is, what could this type of program look like in more detail?
Okay, thank you very much, Bill and Paul, for that. I'm looking to my colleagues for comment on what's just been presented. Did you have a hand? Okay. I'll start with Councillor Robb.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry. First of all, I agree that it needs to be a combined joint effort, because my question, I guess, what was the basis to come up with 200-acre tracts? And but at that amount, and when you consider the cost of land in our area at that time, I agree that it must be a joint effort, because a lower tier that is too much to take on a 200 acre. When I hear prices like $33,000 an acre thrown at me the other day, I was it does get out of scope for a lower tier. So I just wondered how you come up with the 200 acres.
To you, Madam Warden. Sure, that had to do with kind of assessing what the province has been looking for provincially significant industrial areas. So that was sort of the threshold that we came across there.
Any other commentary? Councillor Smyberg.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I do want to thank the CEO and also Paul for, I think it's a very forward-looking report. And I do agree that the opportunity is prime right now for us to take a look at this. And I guess I'm saying that because it's clear in the report that an increase in industrial assessment is going to benefit everyone across the county. And I know that we had some challenges, with our budget this year. And if we can realize some of that success in increasing some of that industrial assessment, then I think that will help to curb some of our budget challenges. There'll still be some, absolutely, but I think that's going to help the residential ratepayer, and also as Paul alluded to, keeping that tax rate down within the county. So I'm really supportive of it. I'd like to see some action on that, but I will possibly bring forward a motion once there's been some discussion and more questions. Thank you.
Further commentary or questions from council? I guess, what do you see as the next steps then?
Well, I think we would prepare you a fairly comprehensive report on how we could implement this in camera. We'd go in camera and talk about what this might look like in terms of cost, priorities, location, strategy, all of that. I think we would do most of that in camera and talk to you about it at a future meeting. That could be fairly soon. I mean, Kara, do you want to comment on just some of the work you're doing around we've got a lot of work done, but it's exploratory right now. We need some direction from council that, yes, we want to see what a next step looks like, what it's going to cost before we go any further. Kara, do you just want to comment on some of the work you've done?
Sure. Through you, Warden, many of the lower tier municipalities are aware that we did receive a formal request from Minister Fideli's office in the last month or so regarding an inventory of every piece of industrial zoned or industrial potential lands in Middlesex County. I want to give kudos to all of the lower tier staff who got right on the phone with us, and also to GIS and the planning department. We are all collaborating on that process at the current time. All of your offices have drop boxes set up right now with every piece that we have been able to identify as being significant, not just the 200 acre plus, but every significant piece. So that is a huge undertaking, but it is taking place now. I am anticipating that process will be completed near the end of this month. And once it is completed, all of that information will be supplied to the minister's office so that there is an ongoing inventory. It also assists us tremendously in moving towards the next step of having some further conversations about what a program might look like to support the development of those lands further than they have to date.
And it also helps us prioritize where our thinking should go, because it's the first time we've really had a good snapshot of where the opportunity exists. And also we now have a better understanding of what our neighbors are doing from an industrial and commercial perspective. So it allows us to sort of react to that as well. So I think that would be the next step. I don't think it'll take us terribly long period of time to sort of think this through. We're not going to try to reinvent the wheel. Instead, I think I'd like to have a conversation with some of our local partners about what it might look like. I remember, Michelle, you and I even had a conversation back in Middlesex Center days about what this might look like. And I want to just reignite that so we're not too far out in front. So I'm thinking, either next meeting or the meeting after, we could come back to you with something really concrete about next steps.
Okay, thank you for that. And I will ask one last time for any other further comment or questions from council. So you do have a recommended motion in front of you to accept the report, and I think that comes back then with staff bringing back further information. I know Councillor Smibert, you were thinking of a motion. I don't know if that's in keeping with what you're thinking or if you were looking for something different.
No, that's fine, Madam Warden. I want to make sure that we keep this project moving. I'm not sure if we receive it, if that's going to move it along. So can we change it just a little bit to indicate that we received the report and ask staff to provide a further report on the implementation or something like that in terms of a industrial land strategy program?
Okay, so Paul can clerk it up so that staff will bring further information back in a reasonable time frame. Okay. If everybody's good with that, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Smibert and Councillor McMillan. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, sticking with the CAO's office, a report on our Consolidated Municipal Service Manager Program.
Warden, this is another education report that admittedly I'm way out in front on, but when it comes to municipal finance, there's probably no greater topic that you need to know about than consolidated municipal service manager agreements. That may not make a whole lot of sense right now, but as we move into the next 18 months, it will, because this is a program when it was established that really fundamentally changed our municipal finance landscape. And so I just want to start by giving you a broad overview of consolidated municipal service management, our agreements, and then we'll talk at a future meeting about why this is so important going forward. So we'll move forward a slide and see what I wrote here. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about what it is, how we are different. We are very unique in terms of how it works and then how it works in reality. Okay. So for those of you that weren't here in that time period in the late 90s, what a period of massive change in municipal government. Like, I'm talking massive change. We were a very sleepy little county back then with a small budget and some roads and a nursing home. And then overnight, things changed very, very dramatically. And the common sense revolution came in. And that really did start the needle moving on the county becoming one of the larger public sector organizations in the region. Next. So as I mentioned, there was an election in 95 and a very large PC majority provincially. And they came in on a platform of lowering taxes, reducing the provincial deficit, of course, and the stated goal of reducing the number of municipalities and municipal politicians. In fact, at the time, I thought that they couldn't be any more clear what they were trying to do, because they actually called the legislation the Reducing Municipal Politicians Act, which I thought was pretty inventive. That's pretty good. Just go straight for it. Up until that point, we sort of clouded what we were trying to do in different titles, but that's what they did. And there was really a desire to disentangle. This is the point where CMSMs were born right here, a desire to disentangle policy responsibility between the province and municipalities. And there's lots of history books written about this. Many of the people that were at the table wrote about it, but almost every ministry and every intergovernmental institution was affected in this time period, depending on who you ask, in either a positive or a neutral or negative way. Next. So there's no question that no matter how you view this time period, it was big changes in municipal government. And I'm walking you back to the Who Does What panel. I was actually on the sub panel for municipal government at the time. I had a full head of hair, and I was sitting there at Queen's Park with David Crombie and some other folks, 8 of us that were in municipal government, looking at who does what. A massive discussion about how they should divide up services between the province and local governments. And that led to the Local Services Realignment Act. I'm throwing a lot of terms at you here, but this is really the grandfather of how we deliver services today. Because from this time period in the late 90s to now, we haven't seen anything other than tweaks. This really was a massive change that changed the course of municipal government finance and municipal government in this area. We had a massive service transfer. We inherited more roads than any other county at the time, making us one of the largest road networks in the area. There wasn't any aspect of the services that we deliver or were provided to deliver that wasn't impacted in Middlesex County. When the Local Services Realignment Act was introduced, I was here for just a couple of months at that point. And really the job I thought I was signing up for changed overnight. But council kind of had an idea something was coming, and they even in the interviews for me, they said, are you going to be okay if the county is all of a sudden a $60 million organization instead of a $6 million organization? And it was really exciting times because it was like drinking from a fire hose. So many new services came our way, and we made some mistakes, but we also made a lot of really great decisions as well. And the first decision I made was I walked over to the City of London and started talking to Linda Reed, who is still one of the great CAOs that's out there. And Linda Reed was the city manager or the CAO for the City of London at the time. And I said, let's work together on figuring out how to make this new entity called the CMSM, the Consolidated Municipal Service Manager, that was being put in place. How can we work together to make this best for both of our communities? So the CMSMs were the first time in history that I can remember, this old no taxation without representation. You've all heard that term in your political books. Well, this is the first time where this was institutionalized taxation without representation. And in several service areas, the province created these CMSMs. In 3 service areas, they created these CMSMs and said, even though you have to pay for these services, you're not going to have direct representation on how they're delivered. Never before. I can't even find any evidence of it happening in North America before this. Like, it is very rare for that to happen. So CMSMs were a massive change, not only for how we operate here, but also for how the county and the city work together. One of the interview questions I was asked is, how do you feel about working with the city? Because this is going to be a major thing you're going to have to do. Unfortunately, I had worked at the city for a little while before. So massive change. What else did I say here? What's next? So then what is a CMSM? Let's move on to C. 37 CMSMs were created and 10 district social service admin boards. So those are in Northern Ontario. So as soon as you move up past the Muskoka into Muskoka, you past the Muskoka region, you start seeing district social service admin boards. So in my old territory in Northern Ontario, this is what is in place. They operate quite differently, but similar type of model. So 37 CMSMs, you might think, well, why did the province want 37 CMSMs? I already mentioned that one of the goals was to eliminate the barriers and eliminate the lines of communication that were required between the province and the local municipalities. It was seen as red tape, and ultimately it was. If you're sitting in my shoes and you see that, so where I used to work in Northern Ontario was a district. There was, let's say, 11 municipalities. Each one of them had a social services director. And now there's one overnight. And you saw a lot of consolidation and a lot of lowering of the services, but also the province only had a lot less people they had to communicate with. And in each case, the province, in my view, did a great job of selecting who the manager was going to be, because when counties and cities, who traditionally back then didn't get along that well, counties and cities had strained relations back in those early 90s. Definitely not anything like what Middlesex and London enjoy now. And they balanced it off. So in most places, the county was responsible for land ambulance, and in most places, a separated city was responsible for Ontario Works and social housing. If they had given it all to one or all to another, or some counties got one and some counties got another, it wouldn't have worked. So their manager selection was really bang on. It created a balance. And it's part of the reason I walked the kilometer over to City Hall and said, let's figure out how we can work together on this. Because at least I had a little bit of leverage because we had the land ambulance responsibility. And so For us, when the CMSMs were created, it really made us think differently about county-city relations. It really made us think about cost sharing, because I talked about municipal boundaries before. This is also a time period where municipal boundaries kind of disappeared for a lot of services because the service provider was in a different place, yet you were providing funding. So we had to really work hard to figure it out. And in Middlesex, that meant a lot of change. Okay, next. So a CMSM agreement can be boiled down to this simple fact. It establishes the role of the service manager. What are they supposed to do? And then it sets out the terms for cost sharing, which we'll talk about in a second. And then it implements accountability frameworks. That last piece is really interesting because over the course of time, accountability frameworks have kind of gone by the wayside, but I can tell you in the late 90s, those were really, really important. And we took them very seriously about how we communicate and what performance indicators we used. But those have largely gone away. And now, for the most part, the municipality just has to trust the other municipality to do a great job of providing that regional service. Next. So let's look at these services. I already mentioned that social housing was one. I put land ambulance in the middle because Neil asked me to. And then Ontario Works is another. So these are the three main CMSM services that were implemented across all of Southern Ontario and created new discussions. Okay, next. In Middlesex, London, as I mentioned, we were given responsibility for land ambulance, and London got Ontario Works, housing services, and childcare. And housing services is, of course, social housing. And so I know many of you, when you first came here, were surprised that we're not responsible for social housing because housing is a big deal in the county. And I would say, okay, well, let's go have a conversation with the city about what these needs are. And it was almost a foreign concept to many of you because in almost every other area, that's not the way things work. But they have to do the same thing on land ambulance. They have to come and talk to us about that, and we have to go talk to them about the services that they provide. But we did something different. So we'll look at the next slide. I mentioned that, we'll go one more. I mentioned that I walked over to the City of London. And as I mentioned, Linda Reed was an incredible lady that really understood the county. And we were very lucky that she was there, because when these discussions took place, I said, Linda, do you really want to deliver Ontario Works in sleepy rural Middlesex County? That's not what you guys are best at. You're best at doing urban centers because it is quite a different service delivery type of model. And eventually what we decided to do was something that no other region or no other CMSM area in the province has ever done and didn't do at that point in time. We decided that we would sign an agreement where even though they were the consolidated municipal service manager and had responsibility for Ontario Works and childcare, we would be the ones that would deliver it. Now that is extremely rare, and that took a lot of discussion and negotiation and goodwill on behalf of the city. So when we talk about our relationship with the City of London, I talk about it in glowing terms because that wouldn't have happened anywhere else. And I thank the city for continuing to support us in this quest. Because I think it's served our citizens well, it's served our finances well, and it's been a great partnership through the years. So, but that's not the end of that story, because the province didn't really like it, even though the legislation allowed us to sign this agreement at the time. It was a bit of a loophole that I don't think the province ever anticipated anybody would use. And the ministry folks certainly didn't like it because now all of a sudden they were dealing with a different player. And I can tell you that almost through the first 10 years of this agreement, I felt like I needed a shield from the Ministry of Community and Social Services at the time, because they were constantly at us about this agreement with the city, not liking that it existed. And so what is the next slide? Oh, cost apportionment probably, right? Is that what it says? I'm just reading over Colin's shoulder. Oh, management oversight committees. Okay. I think, is there one more slide before that, Colin? Oh, one more. Yeah. keep going. Management oversight committees. Oh, thanks. I didn't have one of these in rehearsal. Management oversight committees, I said we did some really cool stuff because I talked about accountability mechanisms. And so one of the things that was really important to Linda and I was that we held each other accountable, that I needed an outlet for her counselors to be able to say, hey, you didn't do X or you didn't do Y with land ambulance and vice versa. So we created these really unique structures called management oversight committees. Now, they don't really have a whole lot of power, but what they were was they were a relief valve. When somebody was upset or that when there was an issue, much like you have sometimes with social housing or they have with ambulance costs, this was an opportunity to go away from the cameras and have a conversation about what the realities are and what a valuable tool it's been. Ultimately, they've become education tools. And no matter what happens with future CMSM agreements, these are really valuable times we have with the city and vice versa, because we're talking about, they don't see what we deal with every day with land ambulance, and I don't see what they deal with every day in social housing, because it's over there and vice versa. But together we work on making sure that we understand at the edges, and that has been a fundamental model ever since the late 90s. So when we look at other things like how it works, it really is, there really were 4 different options for how cost sharing could work. But the default position was weighted assessment. Now, at the time, weighted assessment was a terrible option for us for some services, but a great option in others. And we were very fortunate that the city was amenable to looking at cost sharing. And we not only developed a unique agreement, we developed a unique cost sharing agreement. When you go to different conferences, I would encourage you to talk to the folks from the County of Frontenac, for example, where they have constant battles over cost sharing and delivery of services across the Kingston-Frontenac boundary. It's not pretty. Yet we have really, because of the mechanisms that were put in place, and I hope council continues to support in the future, we've been able to avoid all of that and keep our relationships great and feel like both sides feel like they're getting great value for the services that are being delivered. So the next slide shows that not only did we do something unique in how we govern, we also did something really unique in how we cost apportion. And this wasn't done on day one, but over the course of time, we've been able on land ambulance to get things based partially on the location of calls. So that is a somewhat recognition of the fact that the majority of the calls and the growth in calls are coming from the City of London, and some based upon weighted assessment. Now, that took a lot of negotiation. It took a lot of days over at the library between some folks sitting there on both sides and coming to an agreement. And that was really valuable because for council at the time, they wanted some recognition that weighted assessment shouldn't be the only factor. It should be based upon use as well. And that's the first time in municipal government history that that type of formula has been used. So that's rare. Ontario Works. This is also extremely rare. We are each responsible for our respective program and administration costs incurred, with allocation of the provincial funding being done proportionately. Incredible agreement between 2 partners. And so that is a fantastic outcome for both the county and the city, in my view. Housing services, 70% based upon weighted assessment, 30% based on geographic location of the housing units. And the math on that works out very well for both parties as well. And so we're really proud that we're able to get that type of cost apportionment. And as I mentioned, in every single one of these cases, the default position, or maybe I didn't mention it, is weighted assessment. So look how far away we are in all of these cases from that default position. That is an amazing negotiated position for both parties. And then in childcare, each municipality is responsible for the cost incurred, again, just like Ontario Works. So there's a lot to be proud of here. I certainly have had a lot of highlights that we'll go into at some point in time in my life. But this CMSM agreement that was established in like my first 4 months here, I still think serves the test of time and is something that council needs to know more about and support strongly going forward, that we continue to advance these And I know I'm going to pick on Mike a little bit. Mike always says, I'd like to read some of these things, know them better. And so Mike, just for you, the next slide is all of the CMSM agreements. And I don't know, we might have missed that. But anyways, it's in there, Mike, in the slides somewhere. Oh, the next one. There it is. So they're all there. Anybody that wants to see the history of this, it's all there for you. And it's quite a history. So I'd be glad to answer questions, but the next, is there a slide there that says something about 2025? I thought I saw that. Oh, there it is, back one. There you go. The current agreement expires in 2025. And the reason that I'm here today is not to prepare you for that day, but to make sure that you understand and start understanding just how important this agreement is, because you're going to hear Cindy talk about it. You're going to hear Neil talk about it. And as we approach 2025, I encourage you to learn more about it, because this will be a negotiation. This is these are multi-million dollar decisions that are being made, and a percentage point here or there can change municipal finances for both sides. And no matter who's at that table, you're going to need to know a lot about CMSM agreements and the history of them for county to continue to be successful. So that's the education on CMSM agreements.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Bill. There certainly is a lot of information in that, a lot of background and a lot to digest. And we look forward to Councillor McGuire's recap of all the bylaws and history and Ontario regulations coming forward. Is council any questions that you have on what Bill's presented? Are you looking for maybe a little bit more information or clarification on anything that he has shared with you this afternoon?
One other thing, Warden, I'll just mention if there's no questions, is that there might be, but I might have preempted them, but we need to do a better job of in the future making council aware and understanding the issues that are being discussed at the Management Oversight Committee. The Warden and I have both committed to that. We had in the previous council, we had a lot of folks that were with us for a while and they knew sort of what those issues were and how those talks had. But our commitment to our new councilors is, let's make sure you understand the marketplace of ideas that those CMSM or that those, sorry, Management Oversight Committee meetings are. Because for many of you, when you're thinking about an issue that comes up locally and you don't know what table it goes at, for many of these services, it doesn't even land at this table. It lands at that Management Oversight Committee table for some of these critical issues for your local municipalities. So we're going to work, the Warden and I have determined we're going to work to make sure that there's more information about those meetings and timing and how the city-county liaison meetings work, et cetera. We're going to work on that.
Thank you for that. Any questions from council? I would agree with Bill in that, you know, you need to start, we need to start thinking about 2025 because it will be a negotiation. And I think that there will be asks on both sides of the table that could be different than how we are managed today. That being said, for all the frustration that we might feel at the county and our colleagues over at the city might feel, it really is a good relationship. And for the most part, it really does work very well. And we are different than other CMSM relationships across the province. Recently, Cindy and I were at the AMO Symposium for Homelessness, and we sat at a table, and it was very interesting because we had members of a CMSM not far from us on the urban side and the rural side, and you could tell just from body language and the discussions around the table that the sort of cooperation and understanding of the region wasn't there. So as I say, as much as on both from the city and the county, we have our own personal frustrations. For the most part, it works very well. And that is largely in part because of the respect that staff has both at the city and the county for each one and being able to work together. So with that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive that report for information, please. Councillor McGuire and Councillor Grantham. All in favor? And that's carried. Paul, an update on Middlesex Municipal Day.
Through you, Madam Warden, this report basically moves forward with the request of President Blackmore from 2015 to formalize the manner in which Middlesex Municipal Day has been operating, but ensure it continues into the future. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any commentary on the report in front of you or questions, clarification? Okay, with that, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the lengthy motion in front of you. Councillor Smybert and Councillor McGuire, all in favor. And that's carried. And I will talk to our staff at Luke and Biddulph so we can get a date set for 2024. Okay, Dirk, in front of us, a proposed plan of subdivision in the municipality of Southwest Middlesex.
Thank you. Through the warden, very briefly, this is a proposed development in Glencoe off of Stella Ave, just a little bit south of County Road 14. If you were to drive into Glencoe from here, it would create 27 lots for single attached units and then 26 semi-detached units. It is a portion of the municipality that's designated for residential for urban growth. It's on full municipal services, and there is more detailed information in the attached planning reports. Southwest Middlesex Council did support it at the end of April, and the processing did take some additional time locally while they dealt with dealing with some nearby uses and some sort of more technical engineering and drainage issues. So an agency ministry circulation was undertaken, and all the comments have either been addressed through the process or can be addressed as draft plan conditions, and the preliminary conditions are attached. I am recommending approval. I do believe it is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms with the county and the municipal's official plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, great. Thanks for that, Dirk. Questions or comments on the report in front of you and the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, then you've got the proposed motion and recommendation in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor McGuire and Councillor DeVitt. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, Cindy and Joe, back again for homeless, the update on the homeless prevention program funding.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And through the warden to council, excuse me, beyond the report, I just wanted to add a big thank you to Warden Burkhart Jessen, Bill and Cindy for all their work to advocate for additional funding through the homeless prevention program. Thank you also to the City of London. As Bill mentioned in his earlier presentation, we have a continued strong partnership with them, and to the ministers for their support in providing Middlesex County with this additional funding. This funding will help our most vulnerable populations in the county who are currently experiencing homelessness or are at risk of homelessness, including the Middlesex Accommodations Program, which the contract was included in this council report for review and approval. Thank you to CMHA, Thames Valley Addiction Mental Health Services, and the Countryside Motel for their continued support in this program as well. For the remainder of the funding, Middlesex Social Services Department will continue to work with our residents, community partners to ensure that we are meeting the needs within each community. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Hey, great. Thank you very much for that, Joe. Questions or comments on what's in front of you? Okay, seeing none. Before I call the motion, thank you very much for the kind words. I do think that staff needs to be congratulated on all the hard work that you have done on advocating on behalf of our most vulnerable. And I am anxious and excited to see how this program evolves over time. It really is a testament to our commitment to our most vulnerable, and we expect, and I know that there'll be great things that will come from it. So with that, you've got a motion in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Rock and Councillor Smybert, all in favor? And that's carried. On to correspondence and information items. The first set in front of us are the payables and electronic payments. I won't read them all, but I will ask council if you had any questions on the payables in front of you. Okay, then seeing none, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive items 9.D.1 to 9.D.10 for information. Councillor McMillan and Councillor Grantham, All in favor? And that's carried. On to correspondence items. The Roma update for May 18th, 2023. The MNRF letter streamlining of approvals under the Aggregate Resources Act and supporting policy. 911 and U pamphlet, the Middlesex County 911 system. The Board of Health update for May of 2023. A public notice from Oxford County Water and Wastewater Master Plan. Strathmere Lodge Census Report for May 2023 from Brent. The Road Department Construction Update for June 12th, 2023. Minutes from the May 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Library Board. The Budget Variance Report for May 2023. Okay, seeing no questions, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive those items for information. Councillor Smybert and Councillor DeVitt. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, we do need to go into closed session. And this is in order to consider proposed or pending acquisition of land, but this is, consider a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or on behalf of the municipality or local board in accordance with subsection 2392CK of the Municipal Act. A mover and a seconder to do that at 2:36 p.m. Councillor McGuire and Councillor